Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to yet another Game for Thought stream right here at Howest Digital Arts and Entertainment in Kortrijk, Belgium. My name is Ali Weiss. I am our ethics coordinator in international game development, and I'm really excited to be back here for yet another Game for Thought stream this month about dark design patterns in games. So for all of you out there that are just scrolling through Twitch, maybe you'll see this later on YouTube. I'll give you just a brief explanation about the Game for Thought series. So basically, Howest Digital Arts and Entertainment, we like to call it DIE. We are primarily a game development, game design, and also digital entertainment curriculum-based university college in Belgium. We sat together last year and we realized that we really wanted to create a space for our students and staff and beyond to talk about the more socially relevant, ethically relevant topics that are concerning the industry. In a curriculum and in an industry that's so technical, sometimes it can be difficult to tackle these issues. And so we really wanted to create a space here online for us to chat about these things. So every month we pick a different topic. This month is dark design patterns. And so this stream, just to give you a brief overview, we will start with a guest presentation, then we'll take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to jump into the meat and potatoes of tonight, which is the moderated panel discussion. So just a brief overview of who will be joining us tonight. Again, we have a very international crew joining us tonight, so very exciting. Our guest presenter joining us from LA, very sunny LA in the United States, is Celia Hodent. Celia is a game UX consultant, and she was also the former director of UX at Epic Games. So we're really excited to hear from Celia and receive some insights from her presentation. Also on the panel, we have Aline van Dover, who I really tried to get her name right before this. She is sitting right next to me. You'll see her in a little bit in the panel. Aline is the founder and manager of Parts of Culture here in Belgium. We also have Stephen Malit. Stephen is a lecturer and researcher at Lucas School of Arts, also in Belgium. And we have Martin French. Martin is a professor of sociology and anthropology at Concordia University. Last but not least, we have two DIE students who are also joining us on the panel. We have Regis Goossens. He is a student of game graphics production here at DIE. And we also have Jens Brunson. I'm sorry, Jens, I tried my best with your name. He is also a game graphics production student at DIE. Also, I hear that Luca School of Arts, this stream is mandatory for some of your students. So hello, any Luca School of Arts students that are in the chat. Just to let you know, we will start with the presentation, then we'll move into the panel discussion. If you have any questions at all during the stream, if something pops up in your mind, make sure to go ahead and put it in the chat. Just make sure that you start the question with a cue beforehand so we know it's a question, and then we will get to it in just a little bit during the moderated panel discussion. So without further ado, I'd love to hand it over to our guest presenter for the evening, Celia Hodent. Celia, are you with us? Alrighty, Celia. We are joined with Celia Hodent, coming from LA. Celia, we're ready for your presentation.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for having me. So, my name is Celia Hodent. I have a PhD in psychology. I've been working in the video game industry for over 14 years now. I started at Ubisoft in France. I'm French. I'm from Paris originally, and I moved to Ubisoft in Montreal. Then I moved to LucasArts in San Francisco, and in 2013 I joined Epic Games in North Carolina, and I became the director of UX at the studio level. So I worked on a lot of different projects and more specifically on Fortnite. And I left Epic late 2017. And since then, I've been doing some consulting work, talking about UX, explaining what this is, and helping a lot of different studios improving their games. I'm also doing a lot of workshops on kind devices and kind of science and what does that mean for design, but also what does that mean for inclusion and stuff like this. So I'm going to present just a very, I need to share my whole screen because otherwise it doesn't work well. So it's going to look a bit weird for a moment. There you go. So let me know, because now I don't see anything on Discord. So let me know if there's something wrong here, if you don't see something. But I'm going to show you a few slides to explain a little bit what UX is, what do we do in the game industry, and then we're going to talk about ethics and a little bit like some definition about dark patterns. Okay, so UX is basically not just considering what we want to do. So let's say you're an architect and you're designing a park. If you're only thinking about what you want and or just thinking about this cost, it might be less costly to have like a straight line here as a path. That's the design. What we call the user experience is what people do with this environment. People have certain intentions, so they understand the environment in a certain way, they have specific goals, and in that case, a lot of people just want to cut through the grass just to be able to go faster and cross the street. That's the user experience. And if we don't think about what people want, what are their goals, how they understand the system, we have that wishful thinking they're just going to follow the path. Then we patched the design last minute, hoping that people are going to follow these instructions. This is not good UX. So this is what UX is about. It's really considering that it's humans going to interact with a system, a service, a park, a video game, or whatever it is. And we have to understand what are the performance and limitations of these humans, what are their goals, so that we can adjust the design to match these goals and not ask people to match the design. So that's what UX is about. It's really shifting from the creator's perspective to gain the user, the end user's perspective. And because an experience is not in a design itself, an experience per definition is what people feel and think of and understand as they interact with something. And this is happening in their brains. And so we need to understand a little bit cognitive science, which is the study of mental processes, so that we can ensure that what we offer is what people feel and perceive and the experience that they have. That's the reason why we need to understand a little bit cognitive science. So this is a very simplified diagram of what's going on in the brain as we process information. It always starts with the perception of an input. Like we have stimuli, we get into our senses, and making sense of that is perception. So it starts there. We have a lot of senses, way more than the 5 shown here. And then as we process that information that we gather, if we learn about something new and if we learn about it, it means that we have a memory for it. And memorizing something means physically there's a change happening in the brain. We have synapses, we have billions of synapses. Synapse is a connection between neurons. And these are constantly changing depending on what we do in life. Watching this presentation right now is going to change the synapses in your brain. But doing anything like playing a video game, like watching a movie, reading a book, practicing a sport or music instrument, all of that is reshaping your brain. We have brain plasticity. The brain is really changing so that it can adapt to the environment. Therefore, we can survive. That's what we did during the pandemic. It was very difficult, but we were able to change from one day to the next how we work, how we collaborate, how we communicate. It was thanks to the brain plasticity. So between perception and the change of memory, there's a lot of stuff happening, of course, a lot of factors. Um, impacting the quality of information processing. You have biological factors, DNA has a factor as an impact. You have physiological factors. If you're stressed or if you're tired, that's going to impact the quality of the information processing. Here, I'm going to focus more on attention because we know that the more we pay attention to something, the better we process that information, and therefore the better we remember it. These are just a few examples of the main mental processes that happen as we learn something or like listen to someone or read a book. But please keep in mind, it's extremely simplified. We don't have independent compartments in the brain like this that are dedicated to just one thing. It's way more complex than that, but we are just simplifying here. So for each of these things, perception, memory, and attention, I'm going to show you one of the main limitations that we have and how we overcome that in games or something else, for example. So if you look at this, think about what you perceive, and you can answer in the chat if you want to see, so that everyone can see what you perceive here. A lot of people actually perceive the characters of Street Fighter in this example because it's the same color patterns as the main characters in Street Fighter 2. And if you've played that game, if you really love, Street Fighter, there's a good chance that you immediately recognize those characters. But if you don't have a connection with Street Fighter, you don't really know that game very well, never heard of it, you're going to see something completely different in that example. You might see, I don't know, Lego blocks or DNA or socks or flags or whatnot. And if you are colorblind, which is the case of about 8% of the male population, is down to your DNA, you might feel excluded from this example, and I apologize for that. But the idea is to make sure everybody understands perception is subjective. You do not perceive the world as it is. It's a construction of your brain, and it depends on your DNA. It depends on your past knowledge. It depends on your expectations. It depends on the context, and depends on many things. So what we do in games, it's not because we think of assets. So most of the stimuli in video games, it's visual and audio. It's not because for us, it's going to be obvious that the players are going to perceive it the way we intended. So that's why we test. For example, in Fortnite, we had this icon back in 2013. We had players coming over to play the game. It was a prototype of the game, of course, and they harvested and explored and crafted and built. They interacted with the menu and blah, blah, blah. And after that, I showed them stuff and asked them, what is this? What is that? I asked them to describe what they perceive so that we can ensure it is what we intended. For this icon, they did not perceive it as we intended. It was intended to look like a trap icon so that people could understand this is the menu for crafting traps. A lot of players thought it was ammunition or something related to trees or something like building. And so that's not good. It means that what we're trying to convey here does not work. And so instead of asking people to change and asking them to learn about this icon that is not intuitive, we change the icon. We changed it into an archetype of a trap, like a bear trap. There are no bear traps in Fortnite, but it's strong enough as an archetype and used as a convention, then we didn't have any more issues when we tested the game in the West. But it's also the reason why we want to retest if we publish the game in different territories, because culture also have a huge impact on our perception. So perception is subjective. That's one of the main limitations that we have, and that's the main reason why we test products, so that we can verify that the people who are supposed to use the product or players from a game will perceive it the way we intended. For memory, I would like you to try to very quickly, because I don't have a lot of time to go through all that, visualize the sculpture, The Thinker from Auguste Rodin, Le Penseur. So he's think about, it's the guy who's really thinking and is sitting in a certain position. Try to picture it and try to remember more specifically on which leg or legs lay which arm or arms of the thinker. The same thing, if you want to try it out, you can put in the chat what you think. Don't cheat. I'm going to show you the answer, obviously. So a lot of people tell me right arm on left leg. Others say no, it's the other way around. And then other people say no, it's on the same side. Most people are wrong. He actually has both arms on the left leg. This is typically not something that we remember, and that's because memory is fallible. We do not take pictures of stuff as we encode information, and when we need to remember the stuff that we encoded maybe like months ago. We just bring back that picture to consciousness. It's exactly the way we um, process that information back then. No. Perception is subjective, it's a construction of the brain. Memory is a reconstruction. So every time we reconstruct our memories, we can potentially alter them, and that's the reason why we don't remember things well. And sometimes we get in an argument with your spouse or with your colleagues or your friends because you remember something that they don't remember, and we just do the blame game. We all have a fallible memory. That's why you should write down stuff. Do not rely on it. And on top of that, we forget a bunch of stuff. So we forget a lot of things, and for what we remember, it's not accurate. Memory is fallible. So in games, we're going to offer a lot of help to players if we don't want to challenge their memory. So that's the reason why in games that are systemic, like Fortnite, we have a heads-up display with a lot of information in there, because we don't want players to have to remember what they have, what is the material that they need to gather, what are their equipment. If they're getting close to a searchable object, we don't ask them to remember what key they need to press. We pop that information up so they always have this information available. And the crafting menu, for example, if they open the crafting menu, they look at a weapon that they would like to craft. We don't ask them to remember the name of that weapon, what ingredients they need, how many of each, and what is the one they're missing. They can pin this recipe on the HUD so that they can just focus on their goals. Like here is, oh yeah, I need to find copper ore. And that's what we do. We decide, that's a design decision. We decide where we want to challenge players. In Fortnite, definitely we don't want to challenge players into remembering the recipes. So we offer some functionalities in the game so that players don't have to remember that. All these screenshots are from probably 2016 to 2017, so it's been a while. Okay, and last little game, I would like you to choose a card and try to remember that card as accurately as you can. It's going to go fairly fast, so pay attention. Like choose a card, pick one carefully, and now I bet I can guess which card you picked and make it disappear. I hope that worked for you. I feel like, oh my God, how did she know that? Actually, I've changed all the cards, so whatever card you picked is not there anymore. That's just a lousy magic trick. But not magicians, obviously, but magicians, this is what they do. They have a very good understanding of the limitation of our brains, mostly in terms of memory and attention. And this is how they do their tricks. This is called misdirection and magic. They misdirect your attention. But in psychology, this is a strong phenomenon. It's very well known. It's called change blindness. Blindness is not a good term here. This should be called change unawareness. But it means like from one scene to the next. If you're only paying attention to one element, you're not going to pay attention to everything. And so sometimes something big can change and you're not going to be aware of it. We are not good at paying attention to everything. Our attention resources are scarce. We can't multitask efficiently. When we have to pay attention to something, what happens is we filter out the rest. And so when we filter out, we don't pay attention to it, and something can change and we don't notice. We're bad at it. And so, for example, in a game like Fortnite, we want to make sure that players are not overwhelmed by a bunch of things. Like, for example, here we want to teach them how to heal. They're getting a damage here on the top left. The HUD is flashing. At the center, you see gameplay tip. You've been hurt. Consume a health item to make yourself feel better. And then it all disappears. This is a footage coming from a real UX test session on Fortnite, and most players actually did not even see in this example that there were stuff flashing on their screen because it's the first time they're having trouble with the husks and with the zombies here, and so they're focused on that. They actually don't even cannot even pay attention to stuff flashing on their screen. So we want to avoid stuff like that. Even though a lot of games challenge players' attention, we don't want to put them in that situation. So that's what we do. We understand that perception is subjective, attention resources are scarce, and memory is fallible. And we're going to track down all the frustrations that are not by design when we talk about a game, so that players can have the experience that we want them to have. But a game is not a tool. So when we make a tool, we track down every frustration so that users can accomplish their goals. when you play a game is an art form. So we will put pressure on the player, and we're going to challenge them. For example, there are games that challenge perception, a game like Monument Valley, where you play around with perspective. Many games challenge attention, but we don't necessarily want to challenge attention when players are learning about something. And some other games challenge memory. It depends on what you want to challenge players, but we will make sure that they are not getting any frustration that are not by design for a game. So we look at things like usability. For any product, we want to make sure that people are able to use the product, understand what they need to do, and they're not overwhelmed by stuff. But for stuff like games, it's really also important to make sure that a game is engaging, because there's no point in playing a game or watching a movie or reading a book if it's not engaging. It's entertainment, it's art. And so a game can be usable and boring. So it's not just that. We also make sure that the game is going to be fun and motivating and create some emotions, just like any other art form. So all of this just to introduce you to UX and to make you understand that there's no such thing as neutral design. That does not exist. Like a movie, when they do a close-up on a character that's happening something hard on them, they do that to make you feel sad or to feel, empathy for the character, and they're going to use like sad music. So movies manipulate your emotions. That's the point of art, to manipulate emotion and to make us think about stuff. And that's not neutral. And even just like, I don't know if you see me, but there's a handle on my mug that's not neutral. It's influencing me to use the mug in a certain way. No design is neutral. So most of the time, the idea is to make sure that people have a good time or they're able to accomplish their goals. That's the goal of user experience. Now you have some people who try to use some what we call dark patterns, which is a design that's intentionally deceiving, and it's used for the benefit of the company at the expense of users. So here also it's manipulating, but not to offer the best experience possible to help people accomplish their goals. Here, the intention is to increase the revenues at the expense of users. The term dark pattern was coined by Harry Brignall, who's a UX designer. He created the website darkpatterns.org. You'll find a bunch of examples there, so I invite you to check it out. But to me, dark pattern is really at the it's the antithesis of UX. The idea is that the intention behind is to deceive the user at their expense to profit the company. Here's an example of a dark pattern. I'm punching up. This is Amazon. So they don't do this one exactly. They change it a little bit. It's still not great, but it's a bit better than this one. So back in the day, you would put like stuff in your cart and you would want to check out. And you click, I want to check out. Then you would see this screen, like a big screen with a bunch of text and a big orange button saying get started. Most of us, because our attentional resources are scarce, are not going to need carefully all the stuff written here. We're just gonna click on the big orange button. But if we don't pay attention here, we're not only getting started at checking out. Here, we're actually getting started at checking out and subscribing to Amazon Prime. If you do not want to subscribe to Amazon Prime and just want to check out, you need to click on that small element here. It's actually harder to see, it's harder to click on. And on top of that, they make you feel guilty because like, oh, you sure you don't want to save $19? Like, are you stupid or what? And on that screen, they don't even tell you how much is Amazon Prime. And so it's very likely like a lot of people subscribed to Amazon Prime and did not even realize it until later. This is a dark pattern. This is exploiting the fact that attentional resources are scarce in order to make profits. And this is not it's deceiving the user. It's not, there's no consensus here. It's not clear to the user. It's not transparent to the user. All these things, it's really against UX because again, what we want is offer the best experience possible to users. So sometimes it's not clear. Is it a dark pattern or not? So here's an example from a game, World of Warcraft, it's an old screenshot as well. Here, let's say you want to delete your character And before you do that, you see what we call a confirmation screen asking you, are you sure you want to delete your character? And not only they ask you to confirm, but they ask you to type in delete. So you might think, okay, this looks like a dark pattern because they forced me to think twice about it. But actually, I would say this is a good UX because this is what we call error prevention. Deleting your character in World of Warcraft that you spent months into creating is very costly. So in UX, we do know that people are going to make errors and we anticipate those errors and we make sure that they don't happen. For example, if you close a software before saving. So not only we try to have autosave, so you don't have to think about it. And if you close without saving for a while, we're going to tell you, are you sure? Because you haven't saved. So we give you options because if that's a mistake, it's very costly to you and we don't want that to happen. So here, yes, it's a win for the Blizzard because they prefer you to keep playing. But if this is a mistake, it's also a win for the user because now they're not going to get the consequences of a mistake that they did not want to do. So in that case, it's good UX because it's a win-win situation. It's not taking advantage of the user. It's making them think, are you sure this is what you want to do? Now, if the character behind was crying, then it would start to look more like a dark pattern because then it would use guilt tripping to make you feel bad about stop playing. So there's a lot of gray areas, not technically dark pattern, because technically a dark pattern needs to be really deceiving. So you really don't pay attention or you didn't realize what's happening. Gray areas are more like influences. And again, this influence is about exploiting some human biases to make you stay longer or buy something. Here are some examples. Scarcity. We know that we have a bias if something is scarce. We want more of that, even though we don't need it. You probably experienced this during the pandemic. Like we had a scarcity of toilet paper, and maybe even though you had enough toilet paper to survive for a month, we want to buy more toilet paper just in case we're gonna miss out on this toilet paper. So that's scarcity. So, and sometimes you have company that fake scarcity. They tell you just one left on internet if you want to buy something, and that's not true. But they fake scarcity to make you feel that, oh, I need to buy it. Scarcity works well with the fear of missing out. When we don't have a lot, if there's scarcity of something, or if there's a sale and it's just gonna happen today, we feel the urge of buying something, even though we're actually not gonna use that. So could be Steam sales, Amazon sales, any forms of sale are playing around with fear of missing out. As you can see, this was not created by the tech industry. It's been here for a while, but with tech, it's maybe more present because we have our phones with us all the time that make us see these great deals. Loss aversion is when you have something, you don't want to lose it. So airlines do that a lot. Back when we were traveling, for example, if you were traveling with one airline and maybe at the end of the year, they would say, oh, if you don't buy one ticket, you're going to lose your experience points or you're going to lose your status. That's using loss aversion to make you buy another thing to keep that. Snapchat, the Snap Streak, that's what they do. Every day, if you connect with someone, you chat with them, you can have just an artificial number that goes up. But that's enough to make you feel you don't want to lose that progression. And that is influencing people to keep chatting so that they're not the one breaking the streak. An anchoring effect is just showing you an anchor. We really don't have a good understanding of how things are worth. And so if we see something, it was maybe $50, but you see like it's not $50 anymore, like it's $13. And now you feel that you're making a good deal, but maybe another item was $10 and was actually what you needed. But now you want to buy something a bit more expensive, $13, because you see that, oh, I'm saving so much money. We only see that. These are gray areas. It's not technically deceiving. You see the information here, but it's playing around with some biases that we have and limitations because we're humans. And it's more for the benefit of the company than for our own benefit. So we see that in games as well. There's some guilt tripping and other emotion trick. There's FOMO is used a lot on online games. Like, oh, you have to be there at that moment, otherwise you're going to lose on something. or using some loot boxes for something that's really useful for you in the gameplay. For games, it's complicated because games, by definition, like by saying, are going to put some pressure on players because otherwise there's no game. Um, that's the reason why it's a bit more complicated to understand where is the line between, okay, it's a game, so there's going to be pressure on players, and this is now flirting more with some dark patterns or at least gray areas. To me, we can discuss that afterwards, but to me, if it's really serving the gameplay, like if you in Tamagotchi, if the Tamagotchi never dies, is there any point in playing Tamagotchi? I don't know, but maybe we can have some enough space for players so that if they're not coming back, every 5 minutes, then the Tamagotchi dies. So as you can see, it's more like gray areas. Where's the line? Or for um, um, loot boxes, what you gain in the loot boxes is it really something super useful for your gameplay? If you don't have that, you're not going to win, or is it more cosmetic? So there's a lot of factors to consider, but this is the idea of how gray areas can how the video game industry can flirt with those gray areas. So we see that in games like guilt tripping or paying to remove discomfort, loot boxes tied to monetization, fear of missing out, lots of version, autoplay, you just play around, and then if you don't do anything, you stay in lobby, you're gonna get back in automatically. All these are questionable, and the last ones is used in what we call the attention economy. So we can talk more about all that, but I just wanted to give you an understanding of why is very nuanced, because games are not for them. There are some pressure that are put on player. We want them to feel emotions, but when is the line? When are we going beyond that line? To me, it's more when we try to engage players, not with the game itself, but with its monetization, or if we punish disengagement with a game or something else. So that's a lot of things that I want you to think of. And that's also the reason why I started ethicalgames.org is just an initiative to try to figure out what would code of ethics look like in the game industry, and where is the line that we should not cross, so that we can still have games that are going to be impactful and fun to play without um, uh, going beyond this. And again, this is really important for UX, for user experience, because having a UX mindset entails considering ethics, so inclusion, accessibility, and making sure we're not tricking people. So it's incompatible with the use of dark pattern or shady practice. All right, so these are all the biases that we had. There's a lot. You can check it out on Wikipedia. This is what UX is about. It's a mindset. It's human-centered. It's grounded in science. It's a collaborative process, and it's benevolent. The intention behind is really, really important. And UX, in its essence, it's about improving people's lives with technology. So remember that your brain is limited. It's doing great stuff, but you also have a lot of biases, and we jump to conclusions sometimes when this is actually not what's going on. That happens all the time. It's normal. It's important for you to understand those limitations so that you don't fall for traps. But at the same time, we need to reconcile that we have these limitations and biases, and understand that we need to redesign the environment so that we can improve everybody's lives and be inclusive. All right, that's about it. I know that there's a little break and I went over a little bit. I'm so sorry. I love to talk about this stuff. It's so fascinating. And yeah, I know we have a little break, I think 5 minutes, and then we can start the panel. Thank you so much for your attention.
Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome back. Thank you so much, Celia, for that really insightful presentation. It gives us a lot of food for thought. But for this panel
My
discussion,
pleasure.
thank you, Celia. I am joined by some fabulous panelists. We are about to dive into a discussion about dark design patterns in games. Just to reiterate, if any of you have a question about anything that's being discussed, make sure to go ahead and put it in the Twitch chat. All you have to do is put a Q beforehand so we know it's a question, and then we'll get to you as soon as possible. That's enough from me for now. I would love for our panelists to introduce themselves. I will first start with the lovely individual next to me, Aline. Aline, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Celia, for the wonderful presentation. We actually really had a good laugh with some of the things that you said,
With
like
the card trick.
thing. It was amazing. You were like, it's deceiving, but it's magic. Yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Aline van Deuver. I'm the founder of Parts of Culture, and I help artists and creative professionals with social responsible selling. So ethics is a very important part of my work. I'm a sociologist, anthropologist, and I'm also very busy with gender. So this is a little bit of my background, and yeah, up to the next.
Great. Thank you so much, Aline. We're really excited to have her here in person because we actually haven't had a guest in person in a very long time because of Corona. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I would love to pass it over to Celia. Celia, if you could just briefly introduce yourself.
Sure. PhD in psychology. Can you hear me? Yeah, PhD in psychology. I've been working in the game industry for 14 years at Ubisoft, LucasArts, Epic Games. Worked on Fortnite. Was director of UX at Epic, and now I'm a consultant. I've been consulting for 4 years, 5 years, and yeah, very happy to be here. Hi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Celia. Alrighty, the next one I see is Jens. Hello, Jens.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Jens. Some other people might know me more as Raccoon, as that is my nickname. I'm a GGP student at DAE, and I'm really interested in dark design and how everything works around it. I'm kind of addicted to one of those games as well, same as Regis. So yeah, well, we're not addicted, of course. He's also right next to me, so that's why I'm looking to the right sometimes. But yeah, that's me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us, Jens. Next up, I see Steven, who's also joining us from Belgium.
Well, I'm currently in Finland.
You are in Finland right now. Just kidding. He is Belgian
But I am from
in
Belgium.
Finland.
Yes. So I'm a professor at Lucas School of Arts, where I teach in game design and animation film. And my research is on all sorts of aspects about games, from psychology to game design. And I'm currently involved in the large-scale project Gameable in collaboration with KU Leuven University and University of Ghent, where we investigate all kinds of hybridizations between gaming and gambling from a legal, psychological, and media perspective.
Awesome. Thank you, Steven, for joining. Next up, I see Regis. Hello, Regis.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Regis. I'm also, just as Jens, a student at Digital Arts Entertainment, studying game graphics production. I'm in my second year, and also I have an interest in dark design patterns. And as Jens kind of mentioned, we felt like we've both also fallen victim to some in the past and currently. I do have to warn that my camera might cut out, but it's not because my camera cuts out, because we have a guest called a fly that keeps jumping on my camera. So apologies if that may happen. But yeah, I'm delighted to be here.
All right. Thank you, Regis. We're glad for you to be here as well. And last but not least, Martin. Hello, Martin.
Everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
I can hear you.
So my name is Martin French. I'm an associate professor with the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Concordia University in Montreal, or Tiohtià:ke, the indigenous name of this place. I study risk and surveillance and social justice. And and I study this in lots of different places, but one of the places I study this in is in games. And this year, I'm really lucky to be the interim director here at Concordia University of the Technoculture, Art, and Games Research Center, TAG, we call it. And yeah, it's been a great chance to get more plugged into game studies research, and been thinking about games and risk for the last number of years. So I also think a little bit about the intersection or convergence or hybridization between games and gambling. And this maybe is a space where we see some interesting design decisions and choice architectures. Looking
Awesome.
forward to the discussion, and thanks Ali and everybody for organizing this.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Montreal. Awesome international panel. All right, so we are going to jump right in. And our first question refers to actually something that Celia had in her presentation a little bit earlier. And it has to do with the definition of dark design patterns. We talked a little bit earlier about how this definition can be misunderstood or misconstrued. And for example, we talked earlier, and Regis was talking about a dark pattern in a game that he fell victim to, and then Celia was like, "But wait a minute, I don't know if that's a dark design pattern." So just to clear this up, what is your definition of a dark design pattern in games? What does that mean to you?
So for me personally.
Sure, why not, Ray? Just go ahead.
So what I was thinking beforehand, before the presentation, I thought that a dark design pattern would be a design put in a game to give players a negative experience, not necessarily benefiting the company or the developers. And this negative experience would force players to keep playing the game, to keep them hooked in a way, till they overcome this obstacle, resulting into a positive experience, which would keep them hooked. Sort of like gambling, but then no, like the company wouldn't get money out of it. So that's what I thought was a dark design pattern, kind of.
Okay, good to know, Regis. So, in line with the definition that Celia gives, but without the piece of the company benefiting.
Or developer.
Okay. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to share what they think or maybe have thought in the past what a dark design pattern is in games?
I kind of agree with the definition that Celia gave. It's the definition that's often, or that's most often given in research, and that there's an agreement on. What I find interesting about it is when we talk about negative experience, that it's often the player being tricked into having a negative experience. Like you start thinking it will be an enjoyable experience, and then in the end it turns out that there's a negative side to it, and that intentionality or tricking players into frustration, for instance, I think that's key to dark design.
That's a great point. Celia, do you have anything to add about basically players knowing that there are dark design patterns in their games? I know that, so not sure if you viewers saw this out there on Twitch, but there was a promo video for this stream in which I gave a definition of dark design patterns, and I think it was slightly off from the one that Celia gave in her presentation. So I really want to hear more about that.
No, but at the end of the day, we need to figure this out. But to me, a software like or Amazon or tricking you into buying or getting Prime without you realizing, it's very different from a game or an art form. Because what does that mean? A negative experience with a game or a movie? With like a movie that makes you cry, is that a negative experience? Or the protagonist dies, and you were really engaged with that protagonist. You're really enjoying watching that character on screen. To me, for art, we can't really use that definition, that a negative experience, because art sometimes brings you a negative experience, like some negative emotions to make you think about stuff. Now, if it's not consensual, then we can start to think, okay, there's there's trickery here, and that's the reason why we in UX we say it's really important to have content warning. So for example, you were mentioning Souls games. They're pretty well known for being super difficult. Like I'm not getting anywhere close to that game because I know I'm gonna lose
Me neither.
my mind. If
Fair.
if you're tricked into it, if you're tricked into, oh yeah, it's gonna be a fun game, and then all of a sudden it's like nightmarish, and you need to pay or to overcome a problem, then I would say, yeah, okay, it starts to look like a dark pattern or a shady practice. But if you have content warning and you know what you're getting in, because it's art, I would not say that the negative experience is enough to call it a dark pattern.
Okay. Yeah.
Great addition. So for you, Celia, it's more about the consensual aspect of it that
For
really
art.
defines the darkness of the pattern.
Yeah, for art. But like I said, if you're getting a product, you're using a tool, and then you get tricked into having a bad experience because you don't buy the thing you wanted to buy, or they add something you didn't see, then yes, that definition of having a bad experience could match. But and it has to be intentionally deceiving, because sometimes you have a bad experience because it's just a bad UX, like a tool doesn't work, or because of daylight savings, you have the wrong time. I had a bad experience about that, but it's no one's fault. It was not intention from anyone's side. So it's not enough to be the definition. It has to be intentional from the company, in order to put forth their benefit instead of thinking about the benefit of the user, or having like a win-win situation, because they're selling products. Of course, they do want to make money. But if there's a win-win situation, it's beneficial for the company, and we think about users' best interests, and we make sure we don't trick them into buying something. It's when this is not respected that I would say it's a dark pattern.
Okay. Great to know.
I like this definition and this discussion. And Celia, one of the things I really appreciated in your presentation was the way you situated for us dark patterns in relation to a wide swath of gray area that has to do with user manipulation, um, enticement, seduction, and so on. And I think for me, like, it's good to focus on dark patterns, but I also don't want to get hung up on this, because I would like, as a sociologist, to have us think about the larger sphere of activity where dark patterns are deployed. And also, I think some of the things that this discussion is underscoring have to do with how users are experiencing um, the design, and they may have a good experience, for example, but then subsequently think about it and feel manipulated afterwards. And so I think we need to have a bit of slack in our description and definition of dark pattern to allow for the becoming of dark patterns, as it were. um, how design choices may not be intentionally deceptive at the outset, but effectively create deception. you know should we start talking, in some cases, in some circumstances where they aren't addressed subsequently, should we start talking about that as a dark pattern? So yeah, I want to, we have this good focus, but I want to also have us think around these gray areas as well.
Yeah. Great point. So for you, it's not always so black and white there.
Yeah,
And
I think I think there's a lot
no,
of
no, go ahead.
I think there's a lot of there are a lot of interesting cases that we could debate about whether it's a dark pattern. But for me, I want to center the user, actually, the user experience. So I think I'm maybe also agreeing with Celia on this point. Like, how are users experiencing this? One person may experience it as something quite manipulative. Another person may have a different reading. And so I think that that's important as well.
Great addition. Stephen, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, in addition to that, I think there's also a lot of discussion nowadays on whether the term pattern is accurate or sufficiently accurate to describe the phenomenon, because it's never just one simple mechanic in a game that you can say this is dark, but it's usually like different mechanics interacting with one another or being integrated in a bigger concept, and also bigger practices surrounding it. And because that gray zone exists, and because most of the dark design happens within that gray zone, it is never so easy to just pinpoint it to, oh, there's grinding going on in that game, so it's dark design. It's usually grinding in combination with pay to skip these boring levels. And so you can never say that these elements on their own are dark per se, but it's usually like a combination of things going on. And that makes it, of course, tricky to assess the intentionality of it. But yeah, it's analytically simpler to say like, oh, it's this pattern that's dark, but in reality, it's like a combination of elements and practices, which is more difficult to evaluate, of course.
Right.
Hmm.
So what I'm hearing is that it's also very context based. So there's no radar that really would alert you to this necessarily, but rather it's very context based. Okay, so now that we have the definition, check. we've defined what we actually mean by dark design patterns. I really want to hear about your experiences with dark design patterns, and as a consumer, as a game player, for example, how am I able to detect these patterns, or maybe not patterns, but design? How am I able to see this in a game, and act accordingly for myself? So I would love to hear your experience with dark design, and also advice for game players, for example.
Can I? Sure.
Of
I
course,
think
go ahead,
the,
Regis.
first thing that I noticed, where I really noticed where I was part of a dark design, is when I saw my wallet. When I was, especially when I was like,
That'll do it, Regis.
yeah, usually when I used to play Overwatch a lot back in the day. Not really supervised, so I used to spend a lot of time on a lot of money on loot boxes, and I wasn't really aware of the concept of gambling back then as much as I thought in hindsight. So I spent like at least 200 to 300 bucks on loot boxes, and I kept spending them because I wanted that one Christmas skin of Turbjorn because it was really cool. But I kept spending money on it, and like yeah, so they made quite some money on me. But in the end, I only lost 300 bucks on this one skin that I wanted. So I didn't get as much out of it in hindsight because I don't play the game at all anymore. So yeah, I think I regret that.
Wow. Okay. Really great insight there, Regis, coming firsthand from you. The effects that these, yeah, especially monetary design patterns have had on you. And would anyone
Yeah.
else like to share? But either experience or tips or advice for game players.
I think for monetary stuff, especially with a lot of PC games like Overwatch or League of Legends, even, I think it's best to just try and make yourself realize that you don't need that certain skin to be any better or any worse at the game. It for some people it'll take a while until they say like, oh yeah, I'll stop buying skins or I'll stop spending money on loot boxes. But yeah, it's once you realize that a skin doesn't make you any better at the game or doesn't make you play any differently or anything like that, I think at that point you can basically say, I don't need that.
Mm-hmm. So for you, Jens, it's you ask yourself, is this a necessity for me to actually
Basically.
succeed in the game? If it's not, then you want to let it go.
Yeah, but sometimes I do like personally I still do every now and then just like I might need it at some point.
Right.
So
It's
I
tough.
do
I think
I do still
A
fall for
fear
it.
of missing out.
Yeah, exactly. I was
That's
going to
true. I
say.
feel it all the time.
It's FOMO. I personally had to laugh, and Sandra over there as well, at the Duolingo example with the owl, because that Yeah, I mean, I think we all like to think that we're above these design choices, but we are not sometimes at the end of the day. The crying owl always gets me. So it's yeah, I actually put a question about Duolingo in here, but we'll get to it later. Anyone else experience or tips for anyone trying to navigate these design choices?
Can
For
I still say one more
Yes,
experience?
sure, Jens,
Yeah.
and then we'll head over to Lean.
Yes. So battle passes as well. I think those are a very um, like very good example of these things that'll drag you into it, because nowadays some of them are free and you get a couple of free items or free skins or experience or a currency from for in the game, but then at a line underneath there it's like, oh, you can get these skins if you pay 20 euro for the battle pass. And it's a little bit more like, yeah, you're looking at those skins and those look way better than the free skins that you get. And then other battle passes also give all your currency back if you grind to the hundreds of levels, to get all the way to the end and get all your money back in a way.
So it's time consuming for you, and it also involves your wallet as well.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Thank you for
Sorry,
sharing.
there's a lot of loss of version in this one. Like, because in the battle passes you see, oh, if you had the pass, this is what you
Yeah.
would have gained, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't, like, you feel like you're losing something. It can trigger loss of version.
Great point. Thanks, Celia. Thanks, Jens. Aline, anything to add?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm more focused on the developer side, because there are a lot of manipulative techniques that we can use and that we learn in psychology. There is like a bigger talk from Celia on psychology mechanics. And the thing is that I think a really good beta test is like if you want to see if it's ethical, because sometimes I truly believe that some developers don't realize that they've put a dark pattern in their game because they're so used to how it's played and because they see it in other places, and it has to be engaging, it has to be fun. We like rewards. I mean, we play games to be rewarded. We play games to play with our friends. So where is the line between a dark pattern and a fun pattern? It's very hard. So I think it's almost impossible to not put it in your design in a way. But I do think that it's very possible to have really good beta testers and look for dark patterns. Like, are we making a fun game that is ethical? I think you just have to be really aware of it, because you can restrict information, you can manipulate decisions, and in a way, it's what makes a game fun. But when are you crossing a line? I think that's a really difficult thing to balance if you don't make other people play your game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. It's also something, it points towards a discussion that we had during our last Game for Thought stream about accessibility. And we came to the conclusion basically that some developers just don't have the awareness of the impacts of these decisions. And so then it comes after the fact, and sometimes you need to see the negative impact that it has on the game player in order to then make a decision for the next iteration, for example.
Yeah, I mean, if you write a book, you're not gonna publish it right away, right? You have like an editor, and then you have like a test audience, and it should be exactly the same for games.
Right. Great point.
Yeah, I think a lot of mobile games don't usually have beta testers and stuff, because I do feel like those are more apparent with like the whole um, with Subway servers, for example. If you fail at the level, you can basically say, "Oh, watch this ad to continue with the level," and it's just, yeah, it's it's
So
engaging people so
mobile
they
games
can.
are tested quite, actually much more.
Yeah,
Other
I
games,
mean, yeah,
they're in a
the
soft
bigger
launch
ones
quite a
at
bit.
least. The bigger ones are more tested, but I feel that a lot of more free ones, or the ones that are just thrown out there to make some quick money from children who don't know better.
Or they
I
are
think,
tested and are put there specifically because they are a dark pattern game, and
That's also a thing, yeah.
that is also a
Great
possibility.
point.
Can we make a distinction between, because you talked a lot about game designers. I want to defend the game designers a little bit, because game designers love games and they really want to create fun games. I think there's also an understanding that if your game is free to play, and now this is the expectation that we have today, there's some publishing requirements, and you have the business intelligence group that is putting some pressure on the game team to make sure that the game is going to be able to make some money. So yeah, there's some, of course, everybody has some responsibility, and game designers do have responsibility, UX folks as well. But the main people driving the business decisions are the executives and the business intelligence group.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction to make there, Celia. Good point. Would anyone
think-
else
I
like
don't-
to share? Yes, Martin, go right ahead.
Oh, I don't know if this is the right time in the discussion, but it does.
It's always
it
the right
is-
time. It's okay.
Thanks, Ellie. It is making me, just think about the importance of this discussion for talking about like the political economy of the games industry, and how games companies like make money in relation also to very, very powerful platforms. Um, so I think that this is a really kind of important point. We're seeing. I don't know if I don't know if everyone would agree with this on the panel, but is it the case that we're seeing the emergence of more manipulative elements of game design that are correlated to a free-to-play type of business model, where interestingly, I think we make a mistake, like really a fundamental mistake, if we think about free-to-play games as only making money if you spend on in-game transactions. I think that there's a lot more going on in these free-to-play games that produce revenue for platforms. And think about location tracking, for example, the way that games can provide powerful platforms with data about where players are in their day-to-day trajectories and so on. There's a lot of revenue that can be generated off of that kind of data for some companies who make games, but also do business intelligence, data analytics, and so on. So I think that I feel like that these are all kind of connected in some interesting ways. I'd love to hear what other panelists maybe think about that. If this is an interesting way to move the discussion.
Sure. Anyone else have any thoughts I would like to share? If not, we can. Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you look at the context of development, and you see how many people are involved nowadays, and how, for instance, psychologists are also more and more being hired as consultants or even parts of the UX design team. I don't think it happens that often anymore that you can say they are not aware that this or this could be a dark design, because they are so focused on optimizing feedback loops, for instance, and there's a lot of testing of those things going on. And in that sense, I totally agree that indeed you need to see the whole production context, or take that into account. And also it's indeed not just about money, but it's usually a combination of monetary spending and time-wise spending, and then personal data or social context. And yeah, so yeah, it's a lot of elements to take into account at the same time. So I agree that this bigger perspective on it can really help.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Celia.
just-
I
Yeah,
see
sorry.
that
I just
Celia was
wanted
very
to-
interested.
It is. I try to not talk too much, so otherwise you don't stop me. I love to try to compare video games to movies, because we have a tendency to talk about video games as if it was just consumerism and it's not art. This is where I can become a bit uncomfortable with that, because games are art and they create emotions, and we love them, and they can create a lot of interesting things. So that's why I love to do the parallel with movies. We know, like in psychology, if you, I don't know if you've read the Heroes with a Thousand Faces, we know that there's a lot of things that we understand from narrative, and there's different theories that filmmakers do to make you feel, really engaged with the story. And we know that a cliffhanger, for example, is going to make you like be at the set, the end of the siege. Oh, what's going to happen now? If using that in a movie, or using variable rewards in a game, is not necessarily a problem. But now if you think about the TV show and you have the cliffhanger, and then it stops and you have to come back next week, or you have to pay for the next episode, the essence of it is the same. So whether you have variable rewards in Mario Kart or in loot boxes, the pattern itself is the same. But now, why is it used? And is it to engage people with monetization, or influencing people to come back because they actually did not get the closure on their story? That's a different story, but it's not the pattern itself. It's how it's embedded into the business element of it.
Yeah, really great point. And I had a question actually later on about how dark design, how these choices overlap between different domains and different fields. And I think, Celia, you touch on it a little bit there with the cliffhanger, and then, having to wait or to pay for something. So I'm really glad that you add that. I do see our academic director is in the chat. He likes to go by Master Chief Rick. He also added a question for us here for today's stream, and I'd really like to jump into it, about free-to-play games. And I know that this was just touched on a bit, so I'll just read off the question, and then we can dive into the discussion. So Rick asks, in free-to-play games, developers need to find ways to encourage players to spend money on the game in order to secure their revenue and refund their production cost. This is where a lot of dark designs come into play. Then he asks, if free-to-play games is the driving force behind the abuse of dark design patterns, shouldn't free-to-play be restricted? Is free-to-play really the base of this problem, or a big driving force of these dark design patterns?
Now, from the first part of that question, the first example that jumps to my mind is Destiny 2, a game that works in seasons currently. It's also free to play, by the way. But if you want to get more content out of the game, you can pay in seasons, and these seasons are only temporarily. So this immediately can create a sort of FOMO, a fear of missing out effect on people, because you just pay for like certain seasons you can play in a year, and all the content connected to that season will disappear 10 to 12 months later. So you're kind of forced to buy them in a certain amount of time because there's also immediately fear of missing out. But there's also a lot of content kind of that comes also locked behind a paywall. That is because the game is like parts of it are free to play. But I don't know how to go in on that. But like it's an example that jumped into my mind because it feels like it really fits into this question as an example. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks for adding, Regis. Anyone else would like to add anything about free-to-play games, and what they might think is the relation between free-to-play and dark design?
I think it will be difficult to forbid free to play if it's a practice that people find feasible to use. I don't think in a society like ours we we would be able to forbid it. And I also don't think, I mean, it's of course the context within which it occurs, but it's not the free to play itself, but it's more the act of deceiving the player into um, spending more time or spending more money than originally um, planned or expected. Um, and for instance, you can have a game with advertisements in it, but as long as you communicate on beforehand to the player that this is your business model and this is how we're going to make money. Um, and there will be films or short commercials you have to watch in between scenes, but at least you know it. And I think that 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 honesty or that clear communication about it, and or the lack of it, that's more something, or rather something to forbid, than just the economic reality within which it occurs.
Right. I'd love to see what Aline, if Aline has anything to add about that, since you do mention the honesty, the transparency in in those sales and in the marketing. Aline, I wonder if you have anything to add as well.
Yeah. The thing is, I don't have any problem with free to play games, but it's like I'm sorry, I forgot your name. It's not on the screen, but it's like you said. Oh, it was almost Steve. Oh, yeah. Hey, Steve. It's like you said. It's about being honest and transparent about what is your model, and also I think it should be mandatory that if the game is addictive, that there is like a disclaimer, like, and also maybe a possibility for people to look for help if they would need it, because I think that's one of the biggest problems. Is it's a very new industry, technically, and there are a lot of challenges that we're facing that we never faced before, and we're just like searching for a way. And I think the biggest problem is the hiding of information, the restricting some information, misleading. I think for me, those are the things that for me are dark patterns. If you deliberately try to mislead your consumer, I don't think it's a problem if you're like very clear on if you want a new skin and it's like a very clear button with a very clear price, and you'd probably want to put an age restriction on it that you can actually. I don't think that's a challenge too. If people want to buy something in a game, I mean, we buy games, we buy clothes. Like, it's not a problem if you buy something, but maybe it could help if you could put like a limit of what you want to buy in the game. Look, I have 50 euros. I want to spend 50 euros. When I go over my 50 euros, I get a notification or something. That they actually help the user to restrict themselves, because these games are addictive. They are rewarding in a way that we want to do more. And for me, that would be a solution. If we know these psychology effects, how can we help our consumer managing them?
So for you, it's not necessarily the free to play element, but it's
No.
the individual choice, and also the choice to make consumers aware of these things and reduce the problem for them.
Yeah, and not trying to mislead them with like hiding messages in a very hard way, or trying to move their decision, to manipulate them into a decision, because it's like it's like Celia said, that you only have this attention span. And I have pushed a lot of buttons in games. I was like, oh shit, no, I don't want to buy. I don't want to buy. And you're like, that you just like, do I have Amazon Prime now?
Exactly.
I mean,
I said before the stream started, Celia, it really resonated with me in your presentation, how the no thanks, I don't want it is tiny. So I am learning Dutch right now, trying really hard to get it down packed. But sometimes online, there are things that I don't understand. And so because these dark design patterns are used, I'm not reading fully, I'm not understanding fully, and then I just press the yes, I want it, and because it's huge. This actually just happened to me last week. So I was like, oh, that one stung. But yeah, great point. Yes, Rages.
Elliot, it happened to me during the stream because I got a pop-up from a disk cleaner on the computer from like a massive disk cleaner, like buy all of this to like help you clean your disk out, and there was like a small button, no thanks. I clicked
so
the no
meta,
thanks button.
Rages.
It was
Yeah.
it's so coincidental. Or fate.
Yeah, so that's again that's a clear dark pattern. But to Martin's point, we also need to look at the gray areas. There's a lot to unpack in what Aline was saying, and I think like ultimately I agree with the sentiment, but in practice it gets hard to apply for several things. So first of all, what is an addictive game? So I'm gonna
And for
just
who
throw
is
out
it
there.
addictive?
Exactly.
And so when we talk about addiction is a pathology. So it's very like you have that craving and you can't help yourself despite creating really bad consequences to your life, to your social life, etc. So most of the time, like people are not addicted, they're super engaged. I'm not saying that creating that engagement is not a problem, but we also need to be careful about the terms we employ, because then you have a lot of people that really freak out, because addiction is a big scary word. But there, maybe the good way to more concrete and useful way to look at it is just like when we look at addiction. Most expert in addiction, we say that addiction is a process, and you have like three agents there. Like first of all, you have the product, so it could be substance. Like typically, addiction is based on a substance like cocaine or nicotine or alcohol. Let's say that rewards can be like a substance for developing an addiction. So that's one. That's not enough. It's not because you have rewards there that that's immediately gonna create a craving. Then you have the person with who they are, the personality. Some people fall more into some engagement patterns or have more problematic. They cannot stop more easily, and also it depends on your age. We know that the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's gonna manage impulses, and it's entirely mature at only 25 years of age. That's why teenagers and children, like the younger you are, the less mature is your prefrontal cortex. It's harder for you the younger you are to
Regis is
manage
like,
these
oh
impulses.
no.
Yeah, I felt that one personally multiple times.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Wait for it. It's gonna be better. But still, adults can still fall for it. We're gonna binge watch something. We're not saying we're good at it, but it's harder if your prefrontal cortex is unmature. So that's the person. And the last agent is the context. If you're grieving, if there's a pandemic or maybe World War III outside your door, of course, it's going to be much harder for you to manage those impulses. So that's the reason why it's important to understand these three agents, like the substance itself, like the object of desire, but then the person, the personality, their age, and also the context. What's going on in your life right now. Maybe you need escapism. Maybe it makes it harder to control yourself.
Great point. With that, I just checked the time and we are flying by. So I'd actually love to head over to some audience questions. So let's start. Okay, so I have a question on the screen. Thank you, tech guy Carlos. So considering that perception is subjective, that's funny because we just touched on that a little bit. Considering that perception is subjective, how do you account for cultural differences when games expand their market? Really great question there.
We test. And when we when we publish a game in
Love
a
that,
different
Celia.
when we publish a game in a different territory, we oftentimes the game studios are going to partner with the publisher that is from that territory, so that they know better, what is understandable, non-understandable, can be really understood very differently or not. That's the only way you can tell. You can also hire people, like in the game industry, you have Kate Edwards. She specializes in culturalization. That's her job, to actually anticipate those problems from happening. So testing and hiring people, their job is about making sure it's fitted to the culture.
Right. That's I think that's a pretty solid answer right there, Celia. I think you nailed hit the nail on the head. That's the saying. Thank you. All right, we'll move right on to the next audience question, which is willful intent important to call it dark design, or can you accidentally make a dark design pattern?
Yeah, I was agreeing with Martin on that, so I'll let him answer
All
this
right.
one. But I agree with that.
Hi, Martin.
I think thanks so much for the question. I think I don't think it's a clear cut one, but so I think Celia's definition is a really good starting point. And I would just add that we, things can kind of like surprise us. Design choices that we made could surprise us, and we subsequently recognize them to be a dark pattern or a problematic design feature, manipulative. And I suppose if we just allow it to continue happening, then that's becomes intentional in some ways, or intentional by not acting to change things. And so I think that maybe is a potential footnote or supplement to Celia's really great definition.
Great point, Martin. Great points. I do see a question in the chat. This is not relating to dark patterns, but Rick, who is our academic director, asks, is Celia willing to become a guest teacher at DIE?
Sure, we can talk about that later. You need to fly me from Los Angeles. Complicated, but I'm always happy to teach.
It's not as sunny here, but maybe you could bring some with you.
We have much better fries. I'm sorry. That's really the thing I'm missing here.
Yes, we do have good fries. Heading on to the next question is, how would you gauge developer intention? Are we putting a lot of stock into being able to distinguish darkness on the basis of intention, or on the basis of intention, is no developer likely to say, I just want to make money at all costs? I think I'm reading
It's
that
like
correctly.
a weird. Wait. What?
Yeah, I think I'm misunderstanding the wording, perhaps.
I think it's about like the developers, like if it's okay if they just want to make money. That's a question.
So okay, yeah.
The
So
question is capitalism okay? I think.
so that's a conversation for a different
let's go.
stream.
Maybe Martin
Easy, we
has
can
like,
solve that in 10 minutes, no problem.
but maybe Martin can like, because you have like really interesting research that you've done.
Yeah, so sorry, and so the question just is kind of thanks, Aline, but the question in terms of like what's okay in terms of revenue generation. I mean, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think I would say that this discussion that you're having today is so great because it's foregrounding norms in your education as designers, and putting these norms up for discussion in broader communities. This is a great way to kind of interrogate what is okay and what's sort of problematic potentially into that gray area. And then I think we have also agreement on what's not okay. One of the earlier questions I think that was posed by the Master Chief was talking about what should free-to-play games be just regulated or disallowed. And I think it's a good question to discuss. I mean, a lot of we could focus on like what exactly defines a free-to-play game, but of course we do have a lot of regulation already in place. Some gambling games, for example, in the province Quebec where I live, you can't access until you're 18. You can't go into a casino until you're 18 years old or older. And there are some jurisdictions, gambling regulators in those jurisdictions, considering free-to-play games and whether they should be considered as forms of gambling and therefore subject to gambling laws. So has been discussion on the part of these regulators about loot boxes, and should those be, subject to gambling laws. And we've seen game designers and game companies change tack a little bit, right, in terms of how they're using that design feature. So I think that it's a complicated question, but I would just say, summing up like a high level response to it, it's important that we have a chance to reflect and discuss on community norms, what's okay in design, what's in the gray area, and what we don't want to see. And it's probably like a fluid situation, so it's calling for an ongoing type of discussion. Does that maybe start to answer that question a little bit?
Definitely. It definitely more than starts to answer that question. Great, Martin. Thank you. in the time that we have now, that was perfect. So thank you, Martin. I see another question on the screen. Do you think that a lot of dark patterns are spawned by a product owner demanding positive KPIs, and thus this resulting in elements being implemented that will keep those KPIs within their targets? First of all, for people in the chat that might not be familiar with KPIs, could someone maybe define those? Shine some light on that?
Those are the goals that you need to hit. Those are like your target. Like, this is what we want to reach. This is the money that we want to assemble. This is the how many people we want subscribed. Right. It depends on which company, what your goals are, but those are like your target goals.
Okay,
like
great.
What are your goals as a company? And yeah, it's a good question.
Would anyone like to expand on that? So do you think a lot of dark patterns are spawned by product owners demanding positive KPIs, thus resulting in elements being implemented? Yes, sure thing. Celia.
Yeah, no, for sure. But just like anything that we measure, every time we measure, let's say you want to have less people calling customer service, and you want to do something so that that number goes down. So that's your KPI. You want less people, consumers, angry consumers coming back and to reach out. So maybe you're gonna create something that when you call, it's automatic response and it's confusing, and so then people don't go through. That would be a bad experience for people. But then your KPI, you reach your KPI. So same thing. If you want to reach a certain KPI and make people and make a certain money, and you see that it's not working well, sure, that can be encouraging to use a dark pattern, because unless people are really pissed against them, which can happen, it can really have backlash, especially on the medium term and long term. But on the short term, it works. So
I think
it is. If you just look at the numbers, you just do whatever you do to make the numbers go up, and you don't care about ethics and people, then yes, that can be a drive.
Aline, anything to add?
I think Cyberpunk should have listened to her before they launched their first version of the game.
Interesting point there, Aline.
God damn. Yeah.
All right.
No comment.
So I see, unfortunately, we only have 4 minutes left. And so at this point, I would love to ask you all if you have any final words, final comments about dark design patterns in games and beyond. What should we be looking out for? What is the importance of this in a nutshell for all of those lovely people on Twitch watching? And so, Jens, I will start with you. Jens, any final words for our audience out there?
Not that I can instantly think of, no.
It's okay. We can come back to you at the end.
I got put on the spot really quickly.
You have 4 minutes, Jens, to think about it.
I'll if I think of something when everyone's been, then
okay,
I'll
worries.
surely come back to that.
I will jump right over to Steven then. Hello, Steven. Any last words for our audience?
Well, I had a lot of thoughts still going. Last words. Well, relating back to a previous question that was asked, like, what can we do? There are some articles, and I think also on the website darkgamedesign.org, or sorry if I have it incorrect.
Darkpatterns.org.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. All of these links will be in the description box on YouTube also, by the way. Go ahead, Steven. Sorry for interrupting.
There's just some simple questions you can ask yourself, like, do I know on beforehand how much time I will spend on the game, and that expectation that I have on beforehand, does it match my actual time that I spent in the game? Do I have regrets afterwards if I have spent more time on the game? So there are like these super simple questions that you can ask yourself, and you can find these questions. And I think, like, as very, because we can keep talking and talking about, is this dark, and where is the responsibility of who? But in the end, it comes down to us as players. Do we have control over our playing behavior or not? And we can always take control because it's an interactive medium. So as a closing remark or practical thing on this topic, I think that's a very good way to start, to just start asking yourself a number of questions about your own time investment, your own monetary investment, your own, well, information investment, let's say.
Sure. So it goes both ways for you, Stephen. All right.
The responsibility, or
Sure.
what do you mean?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, of course, yeah. And what I also just think is we are not powerless, soulless, willless beings. We are. We always have the capability to be in control of our lives.
Right.
And it's also important, I think, for sessions like these to empower people in that respect. And I think that that's why these like simple questions you can ask yourself can be like very relevant tools to give to people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. All right. Next up, I see Regis. Regis, any last words?
Uh, the short version would be consider myself educated. I got a lot of interesting insights tonight because there was a lot of things that we're looking from the developer side on this matter, which I caught myself that I do not have sufficient industry experience, well, zero to none. Uh, so there was a lot of insights I will take with me when I will enter the industry officially. I hope. So,
Yes,
but
Regis.
what I also kind of was confronted with was once again a sentence I heard long ago when I was in philosophy class in high school was that the truth is quite a pluralistic thing. Wow, that word. Which I once again kind of experienced right now. How there were just immense amount of different insights on this matter and how morally gray it is. So it's very interesting. Yeah, I got a lot of food for thought tonight. So
But
it's really interesting. Yeah. But that's kind of my final words on tonight's stream.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you, Regis.
If I
Next
can
up.
chime in now, then.
Yes, of
if I,
course, Jens.
yeah,
Go
okay,
right ahead.
yeah. I also do want to say that I really appreciate this game for thought actually, because the whole definition for me for like door design patterns different like changed dramatically, because I had the same thought of the definition as Regis had, where it was basically a negative interaction for the user and a positive interaction for the producer or the game company itself. And now I'm just seeing it more broader, and I really appreciate that I actually learned way more about it by also just being in here in the call and stuff,
And I am
really learning
super
about it.
happy to have all of you here with me as well. Game for Thought is a highlight of my month. So I'm really happy that you all are here. Thank you, Jens. Next up, I see that we're really short on time. And okay, because this one has got to get their train.
I already have to take the next one. It's okay.
All right, Martin, any final words?
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Great work, fellow panelists. So it's been wonderful.
Indeed.
Thank you so much. I guess I would just say, building on some of the points that folks have made, from my perspective, it would be great to see some of the powerful actors take a more active role in, some of the big platforms, like we talked about battle passes and so on. Just to take a little bit more of an active role in supporting some discussions around the ethics of these developments. I won't name particular platforms, but there are really powerful platforms, and it would be great to see them take more responsibility for these issues.
Agreed, Martin. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your input. All right, Celia, I'll head on over to you. Brief final words.
Okay, so for people in the game industry or wishing to go in the game industry, most of us, we care about games. We love games. We consider that as an art work and an art form, and it's not gonna be able to. We keep it that way if we don't pay attention to what we do. We have a responsibility, so we need to understand this, and that's why I started ethicalgames.org to start to think about these things and where to draw the line so that games can be fun for everyone and be ethical. On the player side, know your biases, learn about the limitations of the brain so that you don't fall for these traps, learn to recognize these things, how to name them so that you can be better prepared, and you can also voice your concerns and put pressure on those platforms to make them accountable so that it doesn't keep going, and to like people here that who organize all this, and universities. It's awesome to have a platform to talk about it and to spread the word. So thank you so much for that.
Indeed. Thank you. It's our pleasure. Last but not least, Aline, any final words for our viewers out there?
I think everything is like the accountability of the the really big companies. I think that one is something that is not addressed enough because they know how it works. They know that there are profits made that are not responsible. But I'm actually really interested in Martin, his research. And I was wondering if maybe there could be like a link also in the description. And yeah, Celia, I'm definitely gonna read your book, which I haven't yet, which is a shame. And to the other panelists, like, thank you so much. This is really interesting. Yeah, I really hope this is gonna happen more, because these talks should happen like everywhere and should happen in every company making games. That there should be like a mandatory, like
And
thing.
that's why we started Game for Thought. That's why we started this initiative. It's really, really wonderful to hear these different insights from all different, from students as well, from teachers, from professors, from industry professionals. It's really a pleasure for us. I think that's all. My final word is I really appreciate you all being here. Let's give a big round of applause in the chat for our lovely panelists, Aline, Celia, Martin, Regis, Jens, and Steven. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone. Also on Twitch, really appreciate you coming out again for yet another edition. Stay tuned, everyone. We're going to take a little tiny bit of a break, but stay tuned for more information about the next Game for Thought session. So hang tight, just another couple minutes or so. We'll get back to you with more information and say goodbye to our lovely panelists, everyone. Thank you. I'll see you in just a couple minutes. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Hello and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another Game for Thought live stream right here on Twitch at Howest Digital Arts and Entertainment about dark design patterns. A big thank you to everyone that makes this possible. Thank you to Howest, thank you to DIE, thank you to our Master Chief, Rick, who makes this possible. Also, thank you to our tech guy, Carlos, and our tech girl, Sandra, and a huge thank you to our panelists for this evening. Also, a big thank you to Quindo, who is our local media lab. We also have a Game for Thought podcast. So Quindo, Bros, if you're watching this, thank you so much for making that possible. Thank you also to the Flemish Audio Visual Fund. Make sure to check us out again next month, April 20th, for another stream about esports. It's going to be a very interesting one, so we really hope that you join us again on Twitch. Last but not least, thank you so much to our amazing panelists for this evening, and thank you to all of you out there who are watching. We really hope that you had some takeaways from the session. I know I definitely did. All right. And with that, thank you so much for joining. We will see you next month for esports. See ya. Have a good night.